Hey guys, this is Cal from Selah Effects, and I'm going to talk to you about the Quartz V2. We've been blown away so far by the response. So thank you all so much for letting us know how you've been using the pedal. We always love to hear that, and we love to hear feedback. So yeah, thank you all for that. When we're designing this pedal, we really tried to think about how we could make playing live and organizing songs easier. Like, we were sick of constantly tapping and not really getting what we wanted, and then we weren't thinking about playing anymore. We were thinking about the pedalboard. So we wanted something that could fit in in any setup, and also let you choose how you'd like to control it. So it's not just set to certain messages sent whenever the factory, the manufacturer decided. We wanted it to be completely customizable. So it'll sync all of your pedals to the same BPM and allow you to quickly change presets on them all. It can read a metronome, like an audio metronome, turn that into a BPM for your pedalboard. Same with Midi Clock and send Midi Clock. It'll send any MIDI message you like, whenever you like. You can do that with the Footswitches or the presets. It'll send a repeating MIDI message on every quarter note. You can name all of your songs. You can see them on a nice big screen. You can add another Footswitch to the Quartz. So you just plug it in, just a normally open momentary Footswitch, and allow for easier control. And you can choose what they do. So you can choose what the external Footswitch does and what the onboard Footswitch does to suit the way that you play. But yeah, best of all, it's completely customizable, and you can edit it from your computer. So you can just enable the features that you want and disable the ones you don't, and it should be able to fit in with any pedalboard setup, we hope. If you just want a nice screen to show the name of the song you're on, the Quartz can do that for you. But that would be a bit of a shame because it can do a lot more than just that. So that's why we like to describe it as the heart of your pedalboard. And so this video is about showing you how to use it on your computer, which will also, I'll go into details about some of those features I just mentioned and some more. Yeah, it's going to be a long video, but there's no way around that, so I apologize in advance. And I'd also like to take the time to thank these guys. We've got Matt, Ken, Alex, James, and Peter. Thank you so much for taking the time to review our pedal. It means heaps, and it's just great to hear that it's all working out for you guys, and it's helping a little bit. So thanks for that. And not just these guys either. We received so many emails with feedback and compliments that it's so nice to hear that the pedal's living up to expectations and doing what it's designed to do. So thank you all for that. First thing to do for the software is to go Google Chrome, and you need to download Chrome. And then once you've done that, come back to this page, our website, go to pedals, Quartz V2, and read the manual. It's always good. And head over to this link here to the software. This will open the Chrome Web Store, and this is where you download it. Once you've got Chrome, it's only 1 megabyte to download, which is nice. And it'll show up as an app. You can do reviews there and everything as well. So up here is where you would install it. I already have it installed, so I just need to launch it from here. So once you install it, it'll show up in 2 different places. You can go to up here, more tools, extensions, and that will show up here. So these are your extensions that you have installed in the Chrome web browser. So we are currently 1061, that's the version. And if we will be updating it constantly, as we get new features, we make it easier to use. We'll be continuing to update it as people give us feedback. So it should update automatically for you on the Chrome browser. But if it doesn't and you want it to force an update, you just go to extensions and developer mode and update extensions now, and that will update all of your extensions, including the Selah one. You can also go to Chrome apps. This shows you your apps you're installed, and you can open it from here too. So once you've opened it, you can open it from here as well. You can actually pin it to your taskbar. So it looks like a normal Windows app. So I think you can do the start menu as well. If I was to click load now, load from pedal, it won't connect because I don't have a pedal plugged in. And it's important to plug your pedal in before you open the software, otherwise it won't connect. But you don't have to plug a pedal in if you want to just start a new session. So you can start a new session and save it as a text file, and the text file will be saved to your computer, and you can just open that and edit it whenever you want. A session holds all the data on the pedal. So that's your presets, menu options, all of your MIDI data, and everything that you need for the pedal. So it's a great way to save different sets, and for different, if you take the Quartz off the pedal board and put it on another pedal board, you can save different sessions for those pedal boards or whatever you want. So I might show you how to do the firmware. So if you go back to Selah website, go to support, Quartz V2. Now, if you can't connect to the software, or you can't upload the firmware, this is a great place to go first. So give you instructions on how to do it on Windows and Mac. I'm on a PC at the moment, so this will be just for PCs. But here's how you download new firmware. The software will actually tell you whether your firmware is out of date or not. So if I open it again, it'll actually come up up here at the top. It'll tell you whether your firmware on your pedal is out of date compared to the software, because the software will be updated all the time, but it depends on how often you update your pedal as to what your firmware is. So keep that in mind. Both of these should work for either 32 or 64. I already talked about this. This is how you update the actual software. Now, troubleshooting, this is a good place to go. We've made a little document for Windows users to make it a bit easier to troubleshoot. If you've worked through all of this and you still can't connect to the software, contact us. And same with firmware as well. We've made another firmware for Mac. But yeah, just contact us if you can't work through that. And yeah, so I'll show you how to do the Windows version. So just download the file. I'm going to copy it to the desktop. Alright, I've just copied it over, and this is the file that you need to run. So first of all, plug your pedal in. So pedal's powered up. Once it's done that, just double click and it'll show you this. Run. It'll try to find the pedal. If it doesn't find the pedal, try a different USB port, and make sure you just wait until the end. It'll tell you whether it's found it or not. If you don't wait until the end, it will actually erase the flash, as you've noticed there, which means that your firmware no longer has, your pedal no longer has firmware installed, which means it'll be probably a white screen and the LED won't be flashing. So just be aware of that. If that happens, just re-upload it. So press any again. So once you've done that, just open the software. So go to my apps, actually. In my apps, and here it is here. So the pedal's still plugged in, so I can now click load from pedal. It'll show you the version of firmware that is loaded on your pedal. This isn't the version of the software. If you have an older version on your Quartz, it will give you a little message here and let you know to update it, because the software, the computer software, will be updated automatically. So yeah, so this is basically it. You have 128 songs, and they are your library. So the idea is to hold all of the songs that you know in these 128 songs. Each song holds a lot of information. So tempo, colors, and a lot of MIDI data, as well as all of your tap outputs. So once you've set up your song, you save it and it's ready to go. You can reorder it later. Each one of these can be a section of a song as well. So you could have verse, chorus, bridge for one particular song just here. And then you would add that to a set list or whatever you want later on. So I will show you a few of the things here. I'll leave these 5 things till a bit later. But this is where you type your name. So I've put D. You can put 40 BPM to 300. So I'll put that one as 300. You can also have 0.5 BPM increments. So if you have a nice slow BPM, you can put a 0.5. So that will make it double that if you want to double it up on something. You can also do it in like this. You would set 1 to 1/8 or half notes. So anyway, so you can do a 0.5. These are your outputs. So the Quartz has 4 auxiliary outputs which send out a standard tap signal. So for those pedals that don't have MIDI, this is a great way to sync them up and actually sort of turn them into a programmable pedal. The Quartz will handle all of the behind the scenes programming, and then will send out the correct tap signals to the pedals to set their times. Yeah, so you have 4, and each one can be a different division, and it can be different per preset. So if I was to add a preset here, T, and a preset here, Y, you can put symbols as well. Not everything is accepted, but you got a few symbols to choose from. So this one here might be all 16ths, and these ones here, that's a quarters, and this is what I set before. So each preset can be different and different tempos. If you try to put a 0.5 here, it won't work because the Quartz doesn't support anything other than 0.5. So the easiest way to do that was to just add a button to add the 0.5, and it'll show up here. You can also select the background colors for each preset. I do like green on black. I like brownie. No, I like red and white. Actually quite like black on white. Okay. Once you've set up your colors, you can reset things. So this will reset all the divisions, all the tempos, names, and colors. Yeah, once again, I'll come back to these settings later. So go to the set list. Now I've named all of my songs, and I've made all of the preset data that I need, and I've saved it to these songs or these sections of songs. So for this current set, this current gig that's coming up, I want a set list that is going to comprise of Y, T, and D. So I add them in order from here on this side. I click on here and it adds it in order. So Y was first, T was second, D was third. If I want to remove it, I can remove T and D will take its place. And I can add T again, and now T's at the end. So I'll add them back in. So now this is opposite to what I've actually got it saved on the pedal. So when you're on the pedal now, these 3 presets are the only presets that are going to be available when you're in live mode. If you're in, you can edit this on the pedal as well. But so this is a great way. You can now save this as a session and reload this later on with these songs in the particular order that you have them in. And that's just a quick way to do it. Resetting will reset the set list, which means when it holds no songs here, that means all of the songs are cycled through. So when you're on the pedal currently, and if your software looks like this, on the pedal, you'll actually be cycling through all of the songs. So it's like you've added all of the songs like this. So it just defaults to that. So I'm going to add them in opposite order. So now, cycling through is nice and quick. I'll go through the menu. All right, so with MIDI, there's a few different ways you can sync time on the Quartz. You can do Midi Clock or tap signals, or you can do a custom MIDI message every quarter note. So this menu option is for Midi Clock, which isn't channel based, so everything will actually listen to Midi Clock. You can't designate it to one pedal in a MIDI chain. So this is global. So if you disable this, Midi Clock will never be sent. It doesn't matter what song you're on, it won't be sent. If you enable it, it will be sent. But it will be sent however many times you want it to be sent. So the Quartz reacts to things. So if you change a preset, if you change the tempo, if it receives a signal from external Footswitch or another pedal via MIDI, it will initiate its sending sequence. So what I mean by that is if you were to tap the Quartz, a new tempo, it will then send out Midi Clock for 4 quarter notes because I have it set to 4. If I was to have it set to 11, it would send it out for 11 quarter notes. So if I was to change preset, it would send it out for 11 quarter notes. If I was to receive a metronome input and the tempo is different, it will send it out for 11 quarter notes. If it's infinite, it's just going to do it all the time. So you'd probably set this to infinite, depending on the pedal that you want that you're actually syncing with, or depending on what you want to achieve by having the Quartz. You might only want the Quartz to send out the signal for 4 quarter notes, so that when it stops and you're halfway through a song, you want to be able to change your other pedal to whatever tempo you want and keep all the other pedals the same. So in that case, you'd set it to 4 so that the Quartz now stops sending. And then you can, in the bridge of the song, change whatever parameter you want on the other pedal, and it will not be overridden by the Quartz. Because if you set this to infinite, all of your pedals are going to be listening to this for all of time, which means that whatever tempo is set to the Quartz will be set on all of your other pedals. So it just depends on how you want to use it. Receiving Midi Clock is the Quartz acts as the slave, and it will change BPM whenever it receives a signal that is different to what it currently is on. So if it's 120 and it's receiving Midi Clock at 120, it's not going to change anything and it's not going to resend out any data. But if it changes to 121, it will resend all of its data out because it needs to sync up all of the other pedals. We've added a threshold so that you can deal with bad clock signals. We found that some devices actually send an inconsistent clock signal, so it fluctuates quite a lot, sometimes jumping, from a few BPM out of whack when it should be 120. It's jumping up to 122. So if that's the case and you have a bad clock signal, set this in accordance to that. So if this is set to 1, the Quartz will change whenever 1 BPM difference has been received. So if you're at 120 and it receives 121 clock signal, it'll change to 121. If you set this to 2 and it receives 121, it won't change. It'll only change once you've received 122, and so on and so forth. You probably never set it to 10 BPM because nothing's that bad, but you might go up to 2 or 3. But most of the time you set it to 1. And this disables whether you're receiving Midi Clock or not. A lot of these menu options can actually be turned off and on per preset and with the Footswitch, but I'll get to that a bit later. Program changes are presets. So if you want the Quartz to change the preset on your pedal, you want to enable this. You can do it, if this is disabled, you can actually do it with custom MIDI as well, but generally you'd probably just have this enabled so that if you were to recall preset 3, it'll set preset 3 for all of your other pedals. If you have this disabled, when you recall preset 3, it's only going to send the tempo data. So keep that in mind. It depends what you want to do. And it'll only send the tempo data if you have Midi Clock enabled or your other auxiliary outputs. But I think a good way to use the Quartz is to have it as a Midi controller, and sending program changes is a good idea. Midi through means that if you have this enabled, everything will be sent through. If you have a controller or if you have it hooked up to Ableton, it will send, if it receives a MIDI message, it'll send it straight through to all of your other pedals. So that includes the Midi Clock as well. There's actually a way to filter these messages, and I'll show you a bit later in custom MIDI. So if you have that enabled, one thing to keep in mind is that if you're receiving Midi Clock from another device and you have this enabled and you have this enabled, you will be sending double the BPM. And that is because you're generating Midi Clock from the Quartz and you're receiving Midi Clock from something else, and then you're actually passing that through. So you're sending double the Midi Clock. So if you're on 120 BPM, you'll be setting all of your pedals to 240. But the Quartz will read 120 because that's what it's receiving, and it's passing through the other data, which means all of your pedals sees both the data. So if you have that enabled and you're receiving Midi Clock, turn that off. But this is everything. So this is program changes, control changes, and any other MIDI data. So if you were receiving Midi Clock and other signals, you would probably have that enabled, you'd have this disabled, and you would have this disabled. So that means the Quartz isn't generating any Midi Clock, and it's not generating any program changes, but it's passing through everything, which means program changes will be coming through as well. Because you don't want to double up on program changes either, probably. One thing to note is that we've found some, for the clock signals that aren't very good, the Quartz receives them, changes to the correct tempo, and if you set your threshold right, you can get that fairly good. And then it sends it through. If you want to clean that signal up, we've actually found a good way to do that is to disable MIDI through and generate Midi Clock again. So that way the Quartz is receiving a bad clock signal, cleaning it up, and then sending out its own new clock signal, which means that the devices after the Quartz will be receiving a good solid clock signal, and it'll be set to whatever the Quartz is set to. Whereas if you have the MIDI through enabled, it'll be sending through the bad clock signal. So that's something to keep in mind. Recall once is if you're on preset, once again, preset 3, if you're already on that preset on the Quartz and the Quartz receives a program change, it'll try to change presets. So if you receive a preset change to 2, it'll change to 2. But if you're on 3 and it receives a preset change of 3, it'll try to change to preset 3 again. But you might not want that to happen, because when it changes to preset 3, all of the data is sent out again. Like I said before, when the Quartz listens to changes. So if the tempo changes, or you receive a new program change, or you manually change the preset on the Quartz, it's going to send out the data again. So it's going to send out all of these quarter notes or whatever you've got it set to. It's going to send out all of its MIDI data again. So if you've got this set to 4, it's going to send out another 4 quarter notes of this, and it's going to send out all of the other data that it has. So if you don't want that to happen, enable this so that when it's on preset 3, it's only going to recall preset 3 once. So if it's on preset 3 and it receives a preset change of 3, it's not going to resend all the data. It's just going to stay where it is and not do anything. It'll ignore it. So that's handy if you don't want, if you have kind of a MIDI loop and you're going from the out back to the in of the Quartz. Yeah, it can be handy. Now we're actually about to update the firmware again, and we're going to add another menu item called Recall Setlist. And what that does is, well, currently the Quartz, when it receives a program change, it will change to the setlist item and not the program change. So if you have a set of, the first song is song 55, next one is 3, and the third one is 11. When the Quartz receives a program change for 3, it will actually go to preset 11 because that's the third song in the set. So when recall setlist is enabled, that's the functionality. If you disable recall setlist, it will behave normally, I guess. So it'll be preset 3 will program change 3 will actually be preset 3, and it'll only change to that if it is in the set list. So if you have all of your songs in the set list, it'll change to all to whatever program that you send it, because they're all there. But if you've only got, like I said, 55, 11, and I can't remember what I said, number 5, it will only change to those presets if you send a 55 or a 5 or an 11. So that'll be in the firmware update 107. Yeah, so this is the channel that the Quartz sends out on MIDI. You have 16 channels to choose from with MIDI, so that you can actually ignore messages if you want to ignore them, or listen to the messages that you want to listen to. So you'd set one pedal to channel 2, another pedal to channel 3, and so on, and you would only send messages to the pedals that you want to send them to at the time of your playing. So this is for the in of the Quartz, which means if I set this to 1, it's only going to listen to program changes, which is preset changes on channel 1. So if your Midi controller or your computer sends out on a different channel, the Quartz is going to ignore it until it receives a program change on channel 1. So this is a way to notice that there's no receive program changes menu option. So you could choose whether the Quartz receives the program change or not. But we don't need that really, because you can just set this to a different channel. So if you don't want the Quartz to listen to program changes, set it to a channel that nothing is sending on, and it will just ignore everything. Same with the out. So this is the channel that these program changes are sent out on. So if your pedals aren't listening to the Quartz, make sure that the channel is correct. Now this is quarter notes, and this is how long this is all general stuff now. That was all the MIDI. This is how many quarter notes that the LED pulses for. I should say that the quarter notes are whatever these are set to. So a quarter note of 120 BPM, a quarter note of 81 BPM. So obviously, obviously for different BPMs, the LED will be pulsing quicker or slower. So you can set this to whatever you want. You can just have 2 pulses if you want to flash twice when you change a preset, or you can just have it infinite. I think infinite's good because you can always just glance down and check out what tempo your pedals are set to. This is a option to display in milliseconds rather than BPM. It's important to note that the Quartz actually works off BPM, so that if you were on 120 BPM and you've set it to display in milliseconds, it'll be 500 milliseconds. And if you were to turn the tempo knob up 1 notch, it won't go up 1 millisecond, it'll go up 1 BPM, even if you're displaying in milliseconds, which means it'll be 400 and something rather than 499. Yeah, it works off BPM. So the external input is a foot switch that you can plug into the Quartz. So you can have 2 foot switches all up on the Quartz, and you can assign functions to these later on. I'll show you how to do that. If you enable this, that means output 3 will be disabled, because output 3 is actually where you plug in the external foot switch. So you can't have the out as well as an in. So if you have a foot switch plugged in, you only have 3 outputs, 4 auxiliary tap outputs. You still have MIDI, which can be changed to however many you want anyway. So if you turn that on, you can choose the function of this, and I'll show you that later. It's in foot switches. But yeah, so that's how you turn that on. Metronome input is a audio click. So if your drummer has a clicks signal that he generates and everyone else listens to, you can use a wire cable and come off that and plug that into the Quartz, and it will set all of your tempo whenever the drummer changes BPM on the metronome. Not all metronomes will be supported. We've tried to test as many as we can, and there's actually a way to configure that if you read the manual. But yeah, most should be pretty good. If you have trouble with receiving the signal properly and it being accurate, just read the manual and try a few different values when you configure it. If you have this enabled and you don't have a metronome plugged in, the Quartz will actually jump all over the place with tempo. It'll think that it's that a metronome's plugged in, so it's going to be trying to calculate things that aren't there, which results in a lot of jumping around. So make sure you have that off if you don't have one plugged in. Here's how you configure the auxiliary outputs. So there's 4, and these correspond to these 4. And for each output, you can tell it how many times it pulses. So it can be pulsing forever, or it can be pulsing 2 to 30. Some pedals that don't average, you'd probably just want it to set to 2. Other pedals that do average, maybe 6. You'd probably never be around here, but we just added that just in case. Yeah, so it really just depends on what the pedal needs. Check the manual and also just play around with some values. But usually 6 is a good number. This is the latch time, which means in milliseconds, which means when it pulses, if you set it to 2 and you set this to 150, it means it's going to latch for 150 milliseconds, release, and then latch for another 150 milliseconds on the next quarter note, or whatever division you have it set to. So a way to describe latching is if you have a tap pedal that's just something you've made, or something simple, just a momentary, normally open tap. This corresponds to the amount of time that you have your foot switch depressed. So if you tap it twice and you keep your foot down for 150 milliseconds until you release it, that's what this is set to at the moment. So this is how long that your foot is depressed for. So it just mimics that behavior. So if some pedals like it to be able to be depressed longer, some pedals are quick enough to see a 30 millisecond latching. So you'd probably set this to around 33 normally anyway. So we've also found that some pedals aren't very good at receiving a tap signal, especially those that aren't from factory. If you've had to mod your pedal to receive a tap input, sometimes they're not really designed for it. So if that's the case and you find that your pedal is always out by a certain amount, you can set this offset. So if it's out by 4 BPM, if it's too high all the time, if you have 120 BPM on the Quartz and the pedal is 124, you would set this to -4, which means that the Quartz will actually send out 116 and your pedal will be set to 120. And the Quartz will be set to 120 as well, because that's what it is. And this will be only for this output. So you can set it for each output. Usually you'd probably only have one pedal that's a bit particular. So so you can just sort of just play with these options if the tap signal isn't as accurate as you'd like. Keep in mind that a lot of pedals weren't really designed for an accurate tap input. When they were designing them, they probably weren't thinking about a Quartz pedal that can send out accurate tap signals. So yeah, just play with these values until you get a good reading. You can also set the polarity of each output. So you could set output 1 to TRS and these guys to whatever you want. Normally open is the most common. Normally close, Boss pedals are like that, which means that it's always latched until it's opened and then back again. And TRS is for Strummer pedals, but it could work for other pedals as well. With these two, you only need a TS standard patch lead. With this, you need a TRS lead, which is a stereo lead. So keep that in mind. So that's the menu. I'll go back to the presets. So each preset actually has a few options as well. We'll be adding more of these depending on, you know, feedback that we get, and like this was a user, a customer of ours wanted this feature, so we added it. Same with this one. So yeah, just get back to us if you want any features added. So these are per preset. You can set. For this preset, if you set stop Midi Clock, it won't set Midi Clock just for this preset. Same with all the others. So, and once you go to this preset, it'll be sending it again. So, same with the repeating message. I'll get to the repeating message later. That's a custom MIDI message. The auxiliary outs I've already talked about. That's the 4 outputs. So that will stop if I recall this preset and this is enabled. That won't send any of this data, these 4. If I enable this one, that won't send just this output 4. So we've done that so that if you have a pedal that you don't want to listen to a tap input for a certain song or a section of song, you would enable this for that song, which means the 8th triplets won't be sent out when you recall this DDDD song. So, but if you want to stop them all, you can also stop them all there. If you want to stop every lot of timing, you just enable them all, so that when you go to this preset, it doesn't send out any timing at all, because MIDI clock stopped, auxiliaries have all stopped. You can actually keep that enabled because 4 is part of this as well. And repeating message is stopped as well, which is another way to set time. The Mimic Footswitch button is also preset based. So these are all preset options. When you have that enabled, this will actually be in place of a Footswitch function when you hold. So I'll show you the Footswitch functions first. So these, if you want to change what the Footswitch does, go to Footswitches. The Quartz, like I said, has an onboard Footswitch, and that has 2 functions. You can tap it or you can hold it, and you hold down for 1 second. When you hold down for 1 second, one function happens. It also has a external Footswitch option, which is this guy. So you enable this if you want an external Footswitch, and then you can choose what it does. So this is when it taps, and this is when it holds for 1 second. So by default, you have tap tempo for the onboard Footswitch on the Quartz. When you tap it quickly, it will set the tempo. So, which means that you tap down and release fairly quickly, less than a second. You can also set it to all of these things. And when you hold the Footswitch, it has a function as well. When you hold it for 1 second, it will do one of these things. Same with the external Footswitch. It's a completely separate thing. So it's a really powerful thing. If you have an external Footswitch plugged in, you could set it up so that it goes next preset when you tap the Quartz Footswitch, and previous preset when you tap the external Footswitch. That allows you to cycle up and down really quickly on your set list. So if you're on T and you tap the onboard Footswitch, you'll go to D. If you tap the external Footswitch, you go back to T. It's really quick. So I'll go through the functions. So tap tempo is obvious. It just sets the tempo, and the tempo will override the preset tempo. So if you're on TTT and it's a 120, when you tap, it'll set it to whatever you tap to, and it will send out the data. Like I said, it listens to something that changes. So if you've changed the BPM, it'll send out all of the BPM again, which means it'll send out all of this and the Midi clock and the repeating messages. So that's tap tempo. Next preset is it just goes to the next preset, and that is the next preset in the set. So if you're on T, you go to D, not D to T, T to Y, because it's whatever's in the set list. If you have a set list like this, it will then be in order. So you decide on the order. Same with previous preset. So it just goes back in the set. Midi clock in. So like I said, you can toggle some of these functions in the menu with the Footswitch. So receiving Midi clock can be disabled or enabled by the Footswitch if you have it set to it. So if this was set and I press the Footswitch, now it will do that. If I press it again, it'll do that, and it'll just toggle it. So, and that's really good if the band starts to play out of time, or you don't, for some reason you don't want it to listen to the clock that's coming into the Quartz. You would set this up so that in a certain part of the song, you'd toggle this Footswitch, which would stop the Midi clock, and it won't listen to the 140 BPM anymore, or whatever that's going into the Quartz. It'll listen to whatever you do on the Quartz. So you might set this up for a tap tempo, the external Footswitch, so that when you click this, it's ready to listen to this. And now you're tapping on this Footswitch, and it sets the new BPM. So it depends what you want to do. Same with metronome in. It's just a different way of receiving a BPM. And once you've finished listening to the BPM from the metronome, just press your Footswitch and it'll disappear. Custom MIDI, I will get to that soon. That's up here. Same with this. And Midi clock out is this one. So it just toggles this every time you press the Footswitch, just like doing that. Auxiliary out is like doing, you can't actually disable it, but anyway, it'll stop all of the auxiliary outputs when you press that button, and then it'll start it all again when you press it again. All timing is toggling everything. So if auxiliary outs are disabled, they will be enabled when you press the Footswitch. If Midi clock is disabled, it will be enabled when you press that Footswitch. So this is all timing out, not all timing in. And previous preset is what I already described. Basically duplicated down here, except for the missing tap tempo, because you can't tap tempo when you hold for 1 second. That would be ridiculous. So that is it there. I'll go through. So the mimic. If I go back to here, for this DDD song, if I enable this mimic, it will actually disable the hold function of the Quartz Footswitch, because I'll tell you. Some pedals, you would probably know, if you hold down a Footswitch, it activates a certain feature. So like a ramp function on a Memory Man, or whatever you want. Well, whatever the pedal has as a feature. On the Quartz, normally on the 4 outputs, you actually pulse a signal, which is here. So this only pulses for 2 times, 34 milliseconds held down. if you wanted to activate the ramp feature on your Memory Man, you can't do that with this scenario, because you can only hold it down for 150 milliseconds, which is tiny still, really. So this feature allows you to, for this song only, it will mimic the foot switch. So when you hold down the foot switch, output 4, so we chose output 4 just arbitrarily, it will hold down output 4 for however long you hold the foot switch down, which means that if you have your Memory Man plugged into output 4, it will be latched for however long you latch your foot switch. So it's like plugging a normal foot switch into the Memory Man, like something that you've made yourself, a momentary normally open or whatever. So it'll latch it for that long, and then when you release it, it'll be released. So you'll actually be able to tap tempo with Mimic foot switch enabled, because it's mimicking everything that happens on the foot switch on output 4. So what we've done is, for this, if this was enabled for D, we'll say T, if this was enabled for T, it's going to disable this function when you're on song T. And that's because it can't do two functions at once. So if you have this normally set up to next preset, when you hold down the foot switch of the Quartz and it goes to the next preset, you won't be able to do that anymore. So you're on D and you held down to go to T, so you go to T, but once you get to T, Mimic foot switch is enabled, which means that the output, the function's now disabled to go to the next preset, which means you can never get to Y because this function is enabled on this preset. So if you have that enabled, make sure that you have another way to get to the next preset, and that could be tapping, or tapping the external foot switch, or holding the external foot switch. So just keep that in mind. This function here on the onboard foot switch will be disabled if Mimic is enabled. But if you get to T, if you've come from D and you get to T, this will actually still send out output 4. It'll still send out whatever you have it set to here. But after it sends it out for the first time, it won't send it out anymore. So you go to the T song, it sends out quarter notes at 120 BPM, and then it'll send it out for 6 pulses at 33 milliseconds latched. And then after that, after those 6 pulses, it won't send it out anymore. It'll now only listen to the Mimic foot switch, which means output 4 listens to the foot switch. So it's kind of a hard thing to get your head around, but it allows you to, at the end of a song, so you get to this song and you set a nice BPM for your Memory Man, and at the end of the song, you hold down the foot switch and it does a nice big ramp feature that ramps up and does a cool sound at the end of the song or halfway through the song, or whatever you want, because it should default back to the other tempo anyway. And it's still the right tempo, and it's still, yeah, it just allows you to do a few more things. So anyway, that's the Mimic. Custom MIDI, I'll get to that soon. So custom MIDI has a few different things you can do. Each preset can send out 20 MIDI messages. Now these messages can be anything you want, and this shows how many are sent out per preset. So at the moment we've got one set up for all of these. So I'm going to reset our custom messages, and now nothing is being sent out for each of these presets. So I'll get to that in a sec. But program change is what I talked about before. A program change is when you go from 1 to 2, it'll send out number 2 to all of your pedals. And if you have it enabled, that's what it'll do. But at the moment, it's disabled, which means that it says none for everything. If I enable it, I go back, now it's got all of these program changes enabled. And so 11 corresponds to 11, 10 to 10, 9 to 9. One thing to note with the Quartz is that a program change actually starts from 0 to 127 instead of 1 to 128. So 1 to 128 is what the Quartz is, but MIDI goes from 0 to 127. Now that's just something that we decided we wanted to display the first song as 1 because we think that makes more sense. So, and people will probably get annoyed by that, but anyway. So 1 is 1 and 2 is 2 and 3 is 3. But with MIDI, 3 is actually 2, 2 is actually 1, and 1 is actually 0. So if I was to, this program change is actually 0, and that's 1, and that's 3. I mean that's 2. So anyway, if I go into a song, you actually have bank changes as well, which is one thing to note about bank changes is some pedals call a bank, and it's not really a bank. Like Strymon pedals have have banks, but they're not really MIDI banks. A MIDI bank is a separate thing. So on a Strymon timeline, you have a bank, and it comprises of A and B, and so that's 2 presets per bank. But behind the scenes, MIDI, I think the timeline only has 2 banks. So, and that's 128 presets, and then another however many they have. I can't really remember. So, this is actually MIDI banks. It's not a bank that is referred to on a particular pedal. So make sure that you're looking at an actual MIDI bank when you are looking at this. So you can remove bank changes. So a bank is that'll just send control change 0 when you in front of this program change. So I've removed it. You can reset all of the banks back to 1. You can remove all of the banks. So you can probably leave them all at 1, which is fine for most pedals. So each preset you can define. Actually, I will show you this repeating MIDI message before any of that. So these 4 are like tabs, like these tabs, except they look like buttons. So when you remember this function here, per preset you can stop a repeating message. So for this song it's enabled, for this song it's stopped. The repeating MIDI message is for pedals that need a certain message sent on every quarter note. So like it says here, this message here, this channel message and value will be sent on every quarter note, and it will be sent 0 times. So if you want it to be sent, just drag this up to however many times you want it to be sent, probably infinite, so that when something changes, just like Midi Clock, just like program changes, just like the auxiliary outputs, when something changes, this will be sent. So it'll be sent, at the moment, it'll be sent 4 quarter notes, and then it will stop. So it'll send this message, don't be fooled by this message. This is a MIDI message in full, and it will be sent 4 times, and then it'll stop, and it'll be sent at the correct BPM. You can select what type of message, you can select what channel it's on, 1 to 16, just like we talked about before, what message it is, yeah, whatever it is, and the value. So most of the time the value probably won't matter if you're setting a tempo. So if I go to, I'll show you that later, but so this message here, it'll send a channel, message, and value, and it'll send all of that 4 times. If you set this to infinite, it's just going to continue to send it on the quarter notes. So I'll go back to preset MIDI. So that's another way of setting a tempo, and that's how you stop it if you don't want it to be sent on that preset. And I'll go back here, preset messages, reset program changes. Yeah. So if you go to TTT, you can send 20 messages when this preset is recalled. So if you're on TTT, if you're on YYY here and you go to the next preset with the Footswitch, and you get to TTT, these messages down here will be sent. So I'll add a few. So they're all the same message, so it's pointless, but they'll all be sent when you go to this preset. So if I delete them, you can edit them here. Once you've edited them, make sure you save it, otherwise it won't be saved. You can change the channel, the message, and the value. Shows you what type of message as well. So I'm going to delete all them. And so you can also change the program number as well. So preset 2 doesn't have to send program change 2. It can send program change 57 if you want. So it's up to you. So on the V1 Quartz, it used to be you were always stuck with the defined 2 is 2, 3 is 3, 4 is 4. But on the Quartz, you can set up to whatever you want. You can also change it so that when you turn off the program change in the menu, you can actually still add program changes to the 20 custom MIDI messages for each preset anyway. So you can send multiple program changes if you want. So it's really up to you on what you do. So it's basically complete flexibility as far as doing presets. There's 2 ways to add a message, and that is use our list of devices, or you can just add it manually. So everything that you can do from this section, you can do from here, but this just means that you have to look it up yourself. So you'd choose whatever channel your pedal's on, you'd look up the manual for your pedal, see what message you need to send, what value you need to send, and add it. And once it's added, this will be saved on TTT all the time. And it's also important to note that these will be sent in order. So 127, 55 will be sent first, second, third, fourth. So you can also add from a list. So we've added a few pedals here just to make your life a little easier. We'll be adding more later on depending on what feedback we get. So you select the manufacturer, the device, the action, and whatever channel you set the pedal to. So this will be dependent on your pedal board. But these are all default messages. So if you want to set your timeline to bank, so one way to do it, so this song here is song 1. So I want my timeline, my timeline to be on bank 0. And it's on channel 1. So that means when I go to song 1, my timeline will be on bank 0. So I've set my timeline to bank 0 and when I go to song 1. That is actually 2 messages, but it's calculated it for you. So if I go to timeline bank, I'll go to a different song. Song 3, I want my timeline to be bank 2 because that's 1, 2, 3. So now this will set the timeline to the correct bank of bank 2 when I go to song 3. And that will allow me to when I go to this song, I'll be able to use the foot switches on the timeline to go between A and B. So I feel like that might be a common way to set the Quartz up, to actually set banks rather than presets. Because on a timeline, so now 2 is actually bank 1. On a timeline, you might want to still be able to use the foot switches on the actual pedal and just set the banks with the Quartz so that it corresponds to what you're actually on. I mean, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. So you just delete it. And for this one, I want the timeline to be engaged or bypassed. For this song, I don't want the timeline. So that's how you do it. Now when I go to Y, the timeline will be off. And then you also add in whatever other pedals you have. So for the tonal recall, I want to turn it on. And it's on a different channel. If I was to set this to the same channel, it'd probably get interfered. So it's on channel 3. Happens to be the same message, but that's just a coincidence. So that's how you do that. So you can do a lot of things there with the foot switch messages. This comes down to this custom MIDI option here. So if I set my tap to be custom MIDI, that means that when I tap the foot switch, it's going to send out up to 20 messages when I tap the foot switch. Now to assign these messages, you go to custom MIDI, foot switch messages, and you assign them here. So you choose what type of message you want. You could change a preset, which is program, on whatever pedal you want. If it was the Chase Bliss, you'd set it to 3 because that's what we had it before, and you'd set it to whatever preset you want. Add it. So now when you tap the foot switch, it's going to send channel 3 message 12. This shows you the functions assigned, the messages assigned to each foot switch function. Notice there's onboard tap, onboard hold, on external tap, and external hold. So if I go to here, this is onboard tap, onboard hold, external tap, and external hold. So, and same up here, if you want to add it to, you choose what you want to add it to. So I added it to the onboard tap. So if I go to onboard tap, it shows me that I have one program change added to onboard tap. So this is message 12 on 3. And it's set to custom MIDI, so which means it's going to be sent out. So if I was to do this, if I was to add a control change on channel 1, and it's going to be 33 and 127. And I'm going to add it to external hold. Add it. So now, down here, this immediately changes to show you whatever you've just added. I just added 33, 127, and it's to external hold. Now this, if I go to onboard tap, this is the message I added before. Onboard hold holds nothing because I haven't added anything to it. Tap is nothing. And hold is the one I just added, which is up here, and it shows it down here. You can also change here to 126 or whatever you want. Press save, remember to do that. And now, whenever I hold the external foot switch, which is plugged into 3, whenever I hold it, it's going to send out this message just once. But this is never going to be sent at the moment because if I go back to foot switches and I look at what my external hold foot switch is, function is set to, because that's what I have it set to, it's going to the previous preset. So when I hold the external foot switch, it's not going to send out the custom MIDI because it's not set to it. So that message is never going to be sent, ever. So that's a bit sad. So if you want that to be sent, you select custom MIDI, which means now that's the function for the hold of the foot switch. And when I hold it, it's going to send that out. If I was to add lots of these, so like I said, up to 20, it's going to send all of these out in order whenever I hold it, just once. So it's going to send the 126, it's going to send the 127, and so on and so forth. Once again, you can edit it to be whatever you want and click save. Or you can delete it. So yeah, it really depends on what you want to do. These functions can be anything you want. A common thing might be, so you'd set, one way I might set it up is custom MIDI. If I set custom MIDI here and custom MIDI here, and I want my tap tempo there, and I want the next preset there. So when I tap the external foot switch, it goes to the next preset, tap this, it taps a new tempo. And these two are going to send custom MIDI. Now the custom MIDI is defined over here once again. So if I delete it, all of them, so it's for onboard hold and onboard and external hold. So they both have custom MIDI. Now, when I hold the onboard foot switch, I want to bank up on my timeline. So I go to here, and I could look up the timeline manual and see what messages to send, or I could go to here and go to timeline. And I want to bank up on channel, whatever my channel I have set to the timeline, add it. Now screenshot this or whatever you want, and remember it, and then go back to your foot switches and add the four messages in here. So now whenever I hold down the external foot switch, it's going to bank up on my timeline. Obviously these numbers are wrong. We'll probably be adding functionality here to set from manufacturer as well, but at the moment you have to do it manually, unfortunately. So if you do want to find out whatever message you want to send, just go to the presets and it will show you what to send. And I would do the same then for banking down on channel 3, and I'd copy these, and then I'd go back to my foot switches and I go to external onboard hold, and then I'd add the 4 here. So now when I hold down the foot switch on my Quartz, it's going to go down a bank, and when I hold the foot switch on the external foot switch, it's going to go up a bank on my timeline. So it really just depends on what you want to do. You can also convert MIDI. So if the Quartz receives a message, it can change the channel and send it back out again on a different channel. So that's if this one here is enabled, MIDI through. If MIDI through is enabled, then this is active. If it's not enabled, all of the messages that the Quartz receives, it will stop them. It won't pass them through. So if you want to use that conversion feature, make sure that's enabled. You probably want to have it enabled most of the time anyway. So it kind of tells you what's going on here. So when the Quartz receives a control change on channel 1, I want to convert it to channel 7. Channel 7. So all control changes received on channel 1 will be converted to channel 7 and sent back out again. So this is really good for pedals that only receive control changes on a certain channel. If it doesn't receive it on the channel that you can send it from, the Quartz can sit in between the two and convert it to the correct channel, which means it's going to listen to it. It's also a great way to set, if I was to set this to 16 and none of my pedals are listening on 16, that means that when the Quartz receives a control change on channel 1, it's going to convert it to channel 16 and send it out to nobody, which means it's going to basically stop the message. So that's really great for filtering things. So if you have MIDI through enabled, that passes absolutely everything through the pedal, Midi Clock, and all of your MIDI messages. Nothing's left behind. The one way to leave things behind is by setting up one of these conversion rules so that when a certain message is received, it will convert it to a channel that nobody's listening to. It'll still send it out, but nobody will hear it. And you have 2 of these rules. So you can set up control changes, and then you could set up program changes on whatever channel comes in, convert it to whatever channel you want, and send back out again. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, just email us or suggestions. We're happy to update the software. It's something that we've been doing constantly since the Quartz was released anyway. So we're happy to hear feedback and way things that could be better. So just let us know. I think that was it. Factory resets the whole pedal. The USB devices is when you're connecting the pedal, it'll show you all of the serial ports that are connected to your computer that kind of look right, and it should detect it automatically. If it doesn't detect it, try a firmware update, and the update should fix it. If not, just contact us and we'll walk you through it. One problem might be that your computer is getting a bit confused and it thinks that the Quartz is on a different port to what it actually is on. So when it says Quartz port 1 in the list, it might actually be wrong. It might not be the Quartz. So another thing you can try is just try one of the other items that are listed in the list. If it's still not working, just try them all. You won't stuff anything up. So yeah, once you've saved all of your settings, all of your songs, probably a good idea to save the session so that you don't lose it. If your pedal gets beer spilt on it, it's not going to affect your session. Your session will be fine. Not that that's the most expensive thing, but still you've got all your songs saved. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and sorry it went for so long, but hopefully this covers most things to do with the pedal. It's there's a bit in it, so if you do have questions, just contact us. Yeah, we really hope that this pedal streamlines things a bit for you. It was our main goal was to allow you to focus on playing and why you're playing instead of what buttons to push. So hopefully it does that for you. Yeah, once again, any suggestions or features that you'd like to see in a new firmware update, just let us know. Cheers.